7, Gawain Towler's here, looking very pleased with himself. I mean, I guess if you're running the Reform Party, and I know you're not running the Reform Party, you'd be pretty pleased with the way the year has started, because Richard Tice was in here yesterday, and it would appear that, as ever, Reform is kind of getting way more publicity and way more shall we say, hits on social media and in every other media form than they should be getting.
Well, whether they should be getting, that's an interesting judgment. You get what you deserve.
Well, in terms of the size of their organisation is kind of what I mean.
And you look at, but there again, you look at, say, Edith Davey, and you look at Nigel Farage, you look at Keir Starmer, you look at Nigel Farage, you look at Kevin Badenoch, and Farage is far more interesting than the others.
He is.
He also has far more experience than the others.
And people like him a lot more.
They also dislike him a lot more. But he is much more... He has that Marmite aspect.
I'm not sure he's disliked more than Keir Starmer. I think Keir Starmer is one of the most disliked politicians that's ever been.
I think most people have a sort of slight disdain rather than dislike for Starmer. I think it's increasingly dislike in certain sections of the population that he's come down with.
Well, certainly, I mean, our audience hates him.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I mean, this is a section of that population. But,
you know, bar none.
I would say that there are significant chunks of the public sector that quite like him, as train drivers and various others.
Well, certainly they were all clapping, weren't they, yesterday when he was making his little speech down.
One gets the feeling at the back there's somebody with a spud gun. If you don't stop clapping now,
I know.
we're going to get you.
When he said the NHS was great, they clapped, and you're kind of going, what are you clapping exactly?
Well, that's like saying 2 + 2 is 4.
I know.
To that audience.
Yes.
To some people who have suffered under the NHS, not so much. No, the fact is that Reform have, particularly over the silly season of Christmas, with their ticker, with the fact that our membership shot up by 50,000 in that period of time.
And it's still going.
And it's still going forward and still going strong. I mean, we're now within 50% of the former Labour Party total. We are growing. And what I think is very interesting, unlike most party members of most parties who have been members for years, they pay their dues, it's on annual tick-over subscription. These are people who've just joined. They are keen.
Yes.
They will get out there and knock on doors. They will be doing the activist bit.
And many
They're
of
not
them
just members, but they will be activists.
And many of them are former members of the Tory party as well.
And former members of the Labour Party. I was doing some work with one of our candidates from last year that hopefully you'll be talking to soon. But he is a former Labour guy. He was one of our PPCs. There's a whole series. It's not just... It's possible, one might say, that many of the more high-profile people that come to Reform are Tories. But that's largely because since Blair, anybody with a modicum of patriotism in the Labour Party has been driven out and isn't promoted.
Right.
And so it's not that they dislike our country, they just don't care about it.
No, they're not keen on the flag, are they? Which is kind of perverse.
Well, I am.
Is sort of perverse.
I am quite a shagger in those senses.
Well, the fact it remains, funnily enough, it's a story we haven't covered yet, but we will do, that Keir Starmer spent quite a lot of money redecorating one of the press rooms because it was done out, if you remember, back in the days of Allegra Stratton.
Well, they spent a lot of money on decorating at that time as well.
They did.
It's one of the things they do.
But they painted the walls blue. He couldn't have that, so he's now repainted the walls red.
Well, he's Labour.
I mean, it's a bit ridiculous, isn't it?
It is, but I sort of get that.
80,000 quid, though, of our money.
I know.
I'm not happy about that.
A couple of parliamentary interns who'd do it for threepence halfpenny.
Well, exactly right. I could have sent one of my kids up there to do it for him.
Happily.
Now, let's have a look at Keir Starmer yesterday, though. He was supposedly announcing all these new changes to the NHS and the way that it's going to run. Nobody really was very interested in that. They were far more interested in what he had to say about the grooming gangs. And here's what he said.
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right, then that affects politics because a robust debate can only be based on the true facts.
Well, surely a robust debate can only be based on the true facts if you know what the facts are.
Well, yes.
And the facts have yet to be determined in some of these cases, which is why you would want to have an inquiry, isn't it?
Well, the point is what I find is astonishing. We know that it's 100,000 plus girls across the country, but we don't know exactly because it's over 50 towns.
Right.
There's been 4 or 5 investigations and inquiries. The J inquiry did a fair amount, but it did a lot of covering up too.
The J inquiry, I've got some facts from the J inquiry here, which is what Labour say they're going to use as their kind of, I don't know, their yardstick.
It's the start of 10.
Yeah, as to what they are now willing to do. However, listen to some of the facts from that particular inquiry. they listed a whole series of different places where things were going on, right? But they looked at 6 case study areas where there were no significant reports whatsoever of grooming gangs at all. They used the term Pakistani once in the whole report. They relied on officials rather than testimony of survivors. None of the northern towns which were featured prominently in the scandal were chosen. The final report mentions Rotherham once in 400 pages. It only refers to Rochdale in relation to Cyril Smith. It doesn't mention Telford, and basically 2/3 of a statement from Maggie Oliver for the report was cut out.
Yeah,
so it's a completely
it is a
ill-fitting report, shall we say?
It does not do the job that is required.
No.
And I think one of the things I think is fascinating, and Starmer is one of these politicians, as are others across the board, who will make a public apology for slavery.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with them.
No.
Slavery happened 200 years ago.
Right.
They'll make a public apology for Grenfell.
Yes.
And for the Windrush generation.
Right.
But will they make a public apology to the hundreds of thousands of girls and now women who are still living through the nightmare of what's happened to them? No.
No.
They won't. And what? If there's anybody who deserves apology, it's those people who are suffering today.
But we know exactly why that is, because Labour have got a problem with this story, and the problem they've got with the story is they don't want to upset the Muslim vote. And let's look at what happened when Chris Philp yesterday,
Well,
he's not
the Sikh
one
vote.
of my favourite people, but he's the Shadow Home Secretary. He started talking about this in Parliament yesterday, and he was roundly mocked, by the way, by the opposition on the government benches. Have a look.
It is not far right to stand up for victims of mass rape. And smearing people.
Order.
It's those concerns.
Shadows. People want to hear the statement. Chris Philp.
Smearing people who raise those issues is exactly how this ended up getting covered up in the first place.
And he's right about that,
He's not
wrong. Because councils did it, you know, local MPs did it, Labour Party chiefs did it, people like Simon Danchuk were warned off.
Yep.
I mean, Richard Tyson was here yesterday saying he had received, and we have yet to know more on this, but he broke the story here yesterday. He received an email last night, or the night before rather, from an Oldham councillor basically warning him off looking into what was going on in Oldham. Even now. Incredible.
I remember in Rotherham back in, 2008, 2009, being there talking to what was then the UKIP candidates and councillors, and some of the stories that were coming out, talking to some of the victims, how that they ran down to the door when the door knocked, and in front of them was a black fellow with a red rosette who'd been her rapist.
Yeah.
Knocking on that door.
Yeah.
The poor thing.
Right.
Just terrifying.
Yeah.
Will you vote for us?
Well, look at the stories we've seen even in the last 2 weeks, since Elon Musk has stirred the pot, as it were, and this story has now become a live story again, which is very good because he's done that. We had Samantha Smith on telling us that her abusers have never been put before any kind of court of law, were never charged with any crime. We've had other women who have come forward to say that their abuser was sent on holiday with them. Other people who were somehow allowed to adopt victims that they had been abusing, and so they became part of their family.
And police took them back to them.
And police were complicit in all of this. Police arresting girls of 12 years of age for being drunk and disorderly while they were in a house with 5 grown Pakistani men who were raping them. I mean, it's incredible.
It just beggars belief. And though Musk has come in like a bull at a gate with, one must say, intemperate language in some cases, but he's only just become aware of it. We've known about this for over a decade.
Absolutely.
And so therefore we've almost become inured to it, horrifying though it is. All this is brand new to Musk. And if I'd never heard of it before, I would be fizzing.
You would be.
Fizzing. Steam would be coming out of all my orifices.
Absolutely.
And I sympathise with his rage because I've felt that rage. Now, I admit, because we've read about it, we've known since Andrew Norfolk, since Sue Reid, since other people, since Anne Cryer, that this has been going on, we've almost become blunted to the sheer horror of it.
Yes.
But now the rest of the world sees. And as I say, I don't just want an inquiry. I want a formal apology.
Yeah.
A formal apology from the governing class.
I'd like more than that. I would like to see some of these people.
And I want heads to roll.
I would like some of these people prosecuted.
I want heads to roll.
Who covered it up, right?
Prosecuted, sacked.
Yeah.
The works.
Yes.
No pension. Nothing.
Right.
Because what they have done is diabolical.
It really is. And they're still allowing it to go ahead.
Well, yes.
Ed Davey got a bit of fire and ire from Musk yesterday. Ed Davey said this on Twitter: "People have had enough of Elon Musk interfering with our country's democracy when he clearly knows nothing about Britain. It's time to summon the US ambassador to ask why an incoming US official is suggesting the UK government should be overthrown." Elon Musk, I have to say, in one of the greatest answers to any politician of all time, said, "What exactly do I fail to understand about your failure to stop the mass rape of little girls in Britain, you snivelling cretin?" Which is the greatest description of Ed Davey that I've seen for a while.
My feeling is, Ed Davey is worried about Elon Musk interfering in our affairs.
Yes.
We should be worried about people interfering with young girls.
Yeah, well, exactly right. And this is typical as well of Keir Starmer and the whole BBC's attitude, who, when they had Nigel Farage on Sunday, were more worried about what Elon Musk was saying about Jess Phillips and the language he was using about Keir Starmer
mass rape.
than they were about mass rape. Let's have a look at what Nigel said, actually, responding to what Keir Starmer said about the grooming inquiry.
Well, so much talk over the last few days about grooming gangs, or should I say rape gangs. And Keir Starmer today saying that anyone who's calling for a full public inquiry is jumping on the bandwagon of the far right. Wrong, Prime Minister. The vast majority of people in this country are absolutely mortified by what has gone on. But even worse, the cover-up we've had from the police, social services, and both Conservative and Labour governments. The inquiries that have happened so far have been nothing more than a whitewash. There needs to be a full public inquiry. Let us find out the truth of the scale of this. I'm told that in up to 50 British towns, these gang rapes were going on. I believe the public need the truth. We must have an inquiry.
And, of course, he's absolutely right. And despite all the frothing at the mouth that was going on in the past 24 hours about how Elon Musk and Nigel Farage had fallen out, Elon Musk then retweeted that particular social media post by Nigel Farage and just said, yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, presumably we're all back and good in the hood.
Who knows?
Doesn't matter, does it?
It doesn't matter.
No.
As I said, Musk is an extraordinary man. I suspect he's going to be very busy in a couple of weeks' time when he actually starts his job.
Yeah.
But what he has done has brought not just our own attention, but the globe's attention, the absolute shame of our
Which was
institutions.
actually necessary and needed.
Yes, because you know, it's been silenced. It's not... Yes, the Crowd report. How many years ago was that? And how many heads have rolled? How many people have been fired? How many people have been shamed for what they have done and what they have failed to do?
Yeah.
And as the general confession goes, forgive me for what I've done and what I have not done.
Well, indeed.
And it is what they have not done.
But isn't it interesting that Keir Starmer's MO now, it would seem, having been in and having watched him for 6 months,
hasn't he?
is to basically not do anything about anything and to cover everything up and to complain about the far right, as he did in the summer with the riots, locking people up willy-nilly, telling everyone that, you know, he was having to, you know, get a grip of the country because somehow it was being, you know, usurped and diverted by horrible, nasty, ghastly far-right thugs. When in fact, ordinary people in this country, I would say a vast majority of ordinary people, 95% probably, I can't imagine anyone who wouldn't want an inquiry into this. Right?
It might be worth doing a poll.
Yeah, I mean, how on earth would anybody not want to have an inquiry into how this happened, what we should do about it, and people that should be punished for it?
To a certain extent. I mean, we've had a lot of court cases, and obviously we need more when it comes to the actual perpetrators of the crimes themselves. Yes,
but there's been an awful lot of court cases that didn't happen.
Agreed.
You know?
But to a certain extent, this inquiry isn't really an inquiry into the rapes themselves.
No.
We know about that. There have been inquiries into the rapes themselves. We know they happened, and we know they may well be continuing.
Yes.
What we need an inquiry is the failures of the institutions of our government, the people we pay for, to look after us.
Yes.
And they have failed and failed and failed
again. And they've also failed in deporting anybody, as far as we know.
How many of these rapists have been sent?
But we know that many of them have not been, even though they should have been deported. Many of them are still here because of...
But are they joint nationals, or are they foreign nationals, or are they Brits?
They're joint nationals.
If they're joint nationals, then be gone with them.
And they should be gone.
Be gone.
You know, absolutely right. But that hasn't happened. And the idea that Keir Starmer thinks that he can just sweep this under the carpet...
You can't just blame Labour for that.
No.
Even though he was DPP for a period, you can't just blame Labour for that.
No.
You've got to blame the Conservatives, who failed and failed and failed again. They talk a good game, but what do they actually do?
Right.
These people are still walking the streets. They're still in Asda.
Yeah.
and that is an outrage.
It is. Absolutely unbelievable. We'll keep talking about this, of course, because many of you have got things to say about it. Many of you want to get in touch, and many of you are getting in touch. How about this from Bill in Cheshire? Starmer's speech yesterday, he used the words honesty, decency and truth. Ha! That's rich coming from him. A compulsive liar, freebie taker, promise breaker and selective amnesia sufferer. Unbelievable. Now that is a pretty standard response that I get from people every single day about Keir Starmer. Zoe in Lancashire says this, morning Mike, this is what Starmer is going to do, call us all far right and racist, so we'll shut up. He thinks we will scare us into silence in fear of being locked up. Disgusting, we aren't going to be threatened into silence anymore. That's the way people are feeling. They're angry.
And going back to one of the things you were saying right at the beginning of the section, but what he was supposed to be talking about, isn't privatising the NHS far right?
Well,
and isn't he far right then?
Well, apparently, privatising the NHS is one of the worst things that any Tory government
in fact, they'd foam with the mouth, point fingers and say that's a far right thing, and yet he's doing it himself.
Well, do you remember Jeremy Corbyn?
Safe in
Do you remember Jeremy Corbyn telling us all that Donald Trump had come to Britain when he was president
to
buy the NHS?
It'd probably be more efficient if they had.
Well, it probably would have been. Putting Elon Musk in charge of it. Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. Oh, I'm so angry this morning. What's he doing, this guy, Mr Starmer, our mate? What's he doing? Far right. Did he not learn his lesson from the summer when we know it wasn't far right then and it's not far right now? Is that the way this next 4 years is going to go? As soon as someone doesn't agree with him, he just says it's far right. And yeah, you're absolutely right. What's he doing? Why is no one mad that he's all right to sell off the NHS as well, which I agree with. But, you know, if it was the Tory party doing that or a far right party, his lot would be up in arms, wouldn't they? Yeah. Very angry this morning, Mike. Keep up the good work.
James, good to talk to you. People are annoyed. People are really, really fed up to the back teeth with this ridiculous government, this ludicrous Prime Minister, and this tone-deaf administration who don't seem to understand Britain at all.
As I said earlier, it's not that they dislike Britain, they just don't care. They belong to their mind sits in a global elite, in a Davos mindset. And they're not actually interested. They hold the people of this country in a sort of bemused contempt. They don't understand them, and what they do understand, they don't like.
It's the Emily Thornbury manoeuvre, isn't it? Looking at that, it's a white van, there's a guy with an England flag.
I will admit, there's goodness in Emily Thornbury. I've personally witnessed some goodness.
You have to look for a long time.
But yes, that attitude. That attitude. I remember seeing that photograph and tweeting it out and causing all sorts of mayhem back in the day in Rochester. But yes, it is this. We don't understand them. We don't like them, and what we see of them, we just hate. Actually, it's and slightly frightened. And they should be frightened.
They should be,
because the electoral whirlwind will come,
and it's on the way. We've got lots more to do. Keep those voice notes coming. Gawain, thank you very much indeed.